It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
All the nice girls love a sailor. The head of the Royal Navy in Britain is dismissed peremptorily and for conduct woefully unbecoming. Well, we've got more admirals than we've got warships, so I don't suppose we'll miss him. And the Labour government in Westminster is rapidly rattling down. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, the second most powerful person in the state, is seen sobbing on the front bench as the Prime Minister offers her the kind of support that the rope supports the hanging man with. And they were wearing sashes and the colours of the suffragettes, the champions of peaceful civil disobedience and sabotage and breakages of public property, just before they banned, with only 26 votes against, the civil disobedience, peaceful and sabotage organisation Palestine Action. And Donald Trump is having a celebration with Benjamin Netanyahu in the White House. What could possibly go wrong? You'll find out here over the next 2 hours. It is the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
I'm spoiled for choice in this monologue, and I'll leave the most important issue right to the end. But let me have some fun first, why don't you? The head of Britain's Royal Navy, you know, the Navy that has hardly any ships, that Gilbert and Sullivan Navy. Well, its head, I've got to choose my words carefully here. Its rear admiral, no, its head admiral has just been peremptorily dismissed from the service for an illicit extramarital affair with a married officer who was his subordinate. It is conduct unbecoming. Don't tell me the Royal Navy doesn't any longer have standards. So, as I said earlier, we've got more admirals than we have warships. We've got 13 of those. We've got 2 aircraft carriers, but one of them had to limp into port glued together and is non-functional. And in any case, aircraft carriers are so very last century, floating coffins. That's why there's none of them in the Straits of Hormuz or in the Red Sea. The dismissal of Britain's chief naval officer compounds the military's problem of mass desertion. Not without leave, but people leaving the service and not being seduced by the ever more weird and wonderful recruitment ads that appear in the most unlikely places. The British Army sponsored the under-21 football tournament, I noticed to my amusement just the other day. Well, the British Armed Forces are famously shrunken and, quite woke, actually, but they are itching to fight the Russians. Little Johnheeley, the inky-fingered clerk, who, believe it or not, is your war minister, my fellow British citizens, was promising today to Parliament to ramp up 10 times the number of drones that he's giving to Ukraine. Well, we've got lots of money, you see, and lots of spare military capacity. We've got so much money that we just kicked 150,000 more British citizens into poverty. Official, their own statistics. That's the cost of the attacks on the disabled and the dreadfully poor in the new welfare reform. Isn't it funny how reform is always a bad thing nowadays? At the time of the suffragettes, reform was a positive thing for which people were prepared to throw themselves in front of the king's horse in the Derby, were prepared to chain themselves to railings, were prepared to deface portraits in public galleries, were prepared to disrupt the proceedings of the House of Commons. It was such a success getting women the vote that today in 2025, a whole number of women MPs were decked out in the suffragettes' colours, some even wearing the sash of the suffragettes, others merely the rosette. That was just before they all proscribed against the calls of the United Nations itself, the Palestine Action Organization, a direct action organization in direct line of succession to the aforementioned suffragettes, though they have not been prepared to commit suicide by throwing themselves in front of the king's horse in the Derby, unlike the suffragettes, the same women, hypocrite MPs that were hailing the civil disobedience campaign of the suffragettes, then banned the Palestine Action Group. Now, I've got to tell you, I've got to put my cards on the table. I'm not myself much of a fan of individual acts of direct action. When there's 1 million people going to take an act of direct action, call me. I'll be in for that, because that's a revolution rather than an individual act. But who in their right mind would not have sympathy with someone who breaks into a Royal Air Force base and throws red paint on the fighter jets they're in? Red paint symbolizing the blood which those fighter jets have been eliciting from Palestinian children for more than 20 months. Steadily, every night, they're up there assisting the so-called IDF. I promise my editor, I won't. The red paint can be washed off. The blood shed by the children in Gaza can never be washed away, least of all from the hands of those who shed it. Now, Palestine Action spend almost all of their time taking direct action against a genocide. I've got to tell you and tell the British government, and I hope the courts where this action will now move, that it is a legal obligation on all citizens to do everything that they can to interdict acts of genocide. And Palestine Action have the words of the world's highest court, the International Court of Justice, ringing in their ears. They are the only ones acting lawfully in this picture. It's the British government and its agents who are acting in a criminal way. If there was any justice, it would be them that were being proscribed. It would be them facing court, facing prison. But of course, justice there is little of in this country and still less in many others. Palestine Action were banned with only 26 people voting against. Earlier, the Parliament had kicked the crutches and the wheelchairs away from people on the benefit given, very small benefit given, to permanently disabled, injured people in this country. Because, of course, we have to pay for the 10 times ramped up supply of drones to little Zelensky, don't we? Zelig is still on the rounds, picking everybody's pocket, including British pensioners, including British disabled people. You've got to say, it's a wonder that all the Labour MPs were not weeping in shame and embarrassment today. But the only one who was weeping was not weeping for the Palestinian children in Gaza. Neither was she weeping for the disabled people whose wheelchair she'd just turned over. Neither were they weeping for the poor pensioners struggling to get by. They were not weeping for anybody suffering in the world except themselves, or herself, as it turns out. Rachelreeves, a desiccated calculating machine who substantially forged her curriculum vitae, who said she worked in a bank but didn't say it was in customer services, taking people's complaints about the dust on the counter in the local savings bank. She told everyone she was an economist at the Bank of England, except an economist was definitely not even close to what she was. She told everybody, even more remarkably, that she was Labour, that she was a Labour candidate in her Leeds constituency, but she turned out to be Mrs. Thatcher without the laughs. Rachelreeves is her name. Remember it. I know she's easily forgettable, but she's the next one to be sacked in the British Labour cabinet. The reason I know that is that the Prime Minister was forced by the opposition, who for once did their job today, into offering her support for the wonderful job that she's doing, wrecking the British economy. And he did, but only as the rope supports the hanging man. Whereupon, right behind him, in shot, in the same camera lens, she burst into tears. Now, don't think me misogynist in any way, but it's not a good look for the markets, for the pound, for the stock markets, for the stability of the country to see the second person in the state sobbing in public on the front bench in Parliament. That is a bad look, Rachel. Especially as you've been trying to demonstrate that, like Mrs. Thatcher, you pee standing up. Especially if you've been trying to demonstrate that you are as hard as nails. But when the Prime Minister didn't promise to keep you as Chancellor of the Exchequer, you literally had tears rolling down your cheeks. And then I saw this little Britain figure, you know, that yeah but no but, you know her? Except it was Lisa Nandy. Once actually a very attractive young woman, but now looking like a character out of Little Britain. Then I saw the Prime Minister himself fall down the steps of 10 Downing Street, steps that he's negotiated 1,000 times in the last 12 months. But funnily enough, in front of all the television cameras, tripped and fell on his way out of Downing Street. I say that all of this is some kind of sign. The sign that a government is rattling down. I've lived through the rise and fall of many governments. I sat in Parliament through the rise and fall of many governments. I saw Mrs. Thatcher in her pomp, and I saw her weeping in the back of a taxi as she shuttled out of Downing Street, defenestrated. I've seen Tony Blair, puffed out chest and braggadocio. I saw him slink out of Parliament, making way for his nemesis, Gordon Brown. I saw Gordon Brown's glass eye crying in 10 Downing Street, as he too, by the electorate this time, was defenestrated in 2010. So I know what I'm looking for. I saw David Cameron, having blown it with the Brexit referendum, having to slink away. I saw Boris Johnson bounce, but not quite like Tigger, out of Downing Street for the last time. I saw Theresa May. She was weeping too, but at least she'd just lost her job as Prime Minister. I've seen them all come and go. And so, believe me when I tell you that this Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, will not be there by Christmas. Whoever else is switching on the Christmas TV lights, it will not be the accident-prone, clunking robot Keir Starmer. Because I saw a fellow looking very sleek on the benches just along from him. His name was Wes Streeting. He's the health secretary. He's Israel's #1 guy. And they're getting ready to replace the hapless Keir with the lean and hungry. Just actually recently lean. He must have been on one of those Ozempic jabs that he was going to stab the populace with just before the reports came out about the pancreatitis that they often cause. Wes Streeting has slimmed down. He has that lean and hungry look. It won't be the Ides of March. It'll be Christmas. Mark my words. Now, Netanyahu, the killer, he got a visa. Unlike bobvylan, who got his visa withdrawn for chanting about death on the stage at Glastonbury, a man who's actually delivered death to hundreds of thousands of people in the last 20 months, most of them women and children, an increasing number of them small children, babies even yet unborn. He's welcome. Not just in America, he's welcome in Washington. He's welcome in the White House. In fact, Trump said in one of these ridiculously numerous off-the-cuff comments that he keeps making that when Netanyahu arrived, the two of them were going to have a little celebration. What they were going to celebrate, at first I thought it was the joint attack on Iran or the celebration of the mass murder of hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza. But no, it's now clear that what they are celebrating is the absolutely imminent second American attack on Iran. Iran just closed its airspace. Sources close to the American Department of Defense say that a second wave of US bomb attacks on Iran are imminent. Imminent. Could be now. Might be while we're on the air. Quite likely before we go to sleep tonight. So when they talk of ceasefires, when they talk of the resumption of negotiations I'm reminded of Oscar Wilde's brilliant quip, "The more they talked of their honor, the faster we counted the spoons." They are thieves, they are liars, they are killers, and when they come to you proffering a 60 days ceasefire, well, beware of the Greeks bearing gifts. That's all I have to say, because my next guest, first guest, Mnar Adley, the founder and director of Mint Press News, is going to have very much more to say, and I want to leave time for her to say it. It's the mother of all talk shows. I don't believe that the mainland European countries give a toss about Britain, and I'm certain that the United States would not sacrifice itself for Britain. That's why I say Britain is completely marginalized. As for the Trident missiles, of course, if the United States, which has dual control over these missiles, gave permission for them to be launched, of course, they would incinerate Russian cities. But what good would that do us? Because we'd all be dead, including the people that fired the missiles. You feel me?
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Our poll this evening: is Trump losing it? I suppose it's a question that's legitimate when, again, in one of these off-the-cuff comments, he's acting like a cheap mafioso in, I don't know, New Jersey, threatening Elon Musk yet again. Or maybe it was Bugsy Malone. I wasn't sure which particular mafia chief he was sounding like. But he's now lost Thomas Massey, he's lost Rand Paul, he's lost Ron Paul, he's lost Marjorie Taylor Greene, he's lost, perhaps most significantly of all, the aforementioned Elon Musk. Is Trump losing it? Well, 25,000 people have voted already, and I'm only now announcing it. You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway. You can vote on my X. You can vote on the YouTube community poll, and you can vote on the YouTube stream. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, please share with all your friends. Please subscribe to the channel and give the program the thumbs up. It helps us in our ceaseless struggle against Mr. Algorithm. As I say, 25,000 people have already voted, and sorry, Donald, but a lot of people think you are losing it. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Mnar Adley, founder, director of Mint Press News, an absolutely unmissable Mint Press News. And behind the headlines, she's up first this evening, and very glad I am to welcome her to the mother of all talk shows. Mnar, let's start with the big enchilada. There's huge speculation right now that the United States is about to bomb Iran all over again. And yet it's only yesterday that Donald Trump was talking about a resumption of negotiations with them. What do you think this all means?
Well, I think it's quite obvious that Donald Trump is being pulled in many different directions, which has left him very unhinged on social media and in the statements that he's releasing about this unprovoked military war against Iran, a war that most Americans don't want. And most importantly, his own base, the MAGA supporters, they actually don't want this war either. And as you perfectly presented it, many of the most influential pundits and politicians amongst his base have actually turned against him because they don't want this war against Iran, and they're sounding the alarm that Israel's war policies are not good for America. And I know that there's a lot to disagree with the people that support Trump and the entire MAGA movement. But on this, George, I think we have to unite on all political and sectarian fronts and stand against this Israeli war against Iran. And so we really don't know what could happen. But what we do know is that Trump is surrounded by many Zionist actors from the Israel lobby, from the pro-Israel lobby, and many Israeli-funded think tanks in Washington, D.C. that are funded by weapons manufacturers like Lockheed Martin and Boeing and General Dynamics and Raytheon and others, and many other pro-war neocons that he wanted to drain the swamp out of Washington, but he's still surrounded by those people. And so they're pushing him to continue to expand this war against Iran. Netanyahu wants this war, and he is working in the background with Trump, kind of like that little devil in his ear, to convince him to expand this war. But his base is turning against him, and this could cause a lot of problems here locally. And I do want to mention that the United States, although we're not in a sort of direct, quote unquote, war with Iran, the United States has been providing Israel with all of the means, all of the arms, and all of the intelligence to bomb Iran, to sabotage Iran, and to carry out assassination campaigns. So the United States is actively in a shadow war against Iran. But of course, if Trump allows the United States to expand this war against Iran, it would be completely devastating to the whole world, not just Iran. And Iran is not in Iraq. It would be devastating to the US economy and to the US military. We're dealing with a country that has a large mass citizenship of their country that are ready to stand up and defend their country against an attack against the United States and Israel. Whereas here in the United States, we have a weakened military. You know, we are so-called the strongest military in the world, but we also have a large mass movement here against the war with Iran. And a lot of those movements, are being led by military servicemen. So I don't see this beneficial, and we don't know what's going to happen, but I don't think that this is going to be a good thing for the United States.
There's two schools of thought, Mnar. One, which I think I still, but only narrowly share, which is that Trump is unhinged, that he is losing it, that this savage veering from one side to the other, this apparently nihilistic wrecking of his own base and discarding his best friends, that this is all a symptom of utter recklessness. Others, very respected people like Brian Belichick, for example, highly respected critic, they think this is all an act, and that Trump intended all of this and intends all of this, that there's no mental instability about it, that it's all a plan, was all planned, and it's all going to plan. Where do you come down on these two, this dichotomy, if you like?
Well, that's an interesting take. And I think Trump, if we've learned anything about him, he likes to talk a big talk. I mean, look at what the United States just did in Iran when they struck those nuclear facilities. He came on camera to give a press release to say that it was magnificent and brilliant, and it really shows just how strong the US military and America are. And, we had to rely on Trump to basically shut down and close down Iran's nuclear program. So I personally don't think that Trump wants this war. But I think he's trying to give Israel something to show that he is in support of Israel's actions. And so, on one hand, I'm of the belief that he's very well aware of what he's doing. He is listening to his advisors. He is being influenced by them. But he doesn't like that he's doing that. That's just my personal opinion, of course, and many would maybe disagree with me. And so that's why we're seeing kind of this unhinged appearing behavior. But I do think it is well thought out. He's being advised by some of the most sophisticated neocons that brought us the Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan. And so I think that that's possible. However, I think all of this really is a distraction to what Israel is doing in Gaza. Israel is the one who's truly acting unhinged with the full support of the US and UK government, committing a genocide and, acting in enforcing a mass starvation campaign in Gaza. And so we have this war against Iran building up as a distraction so that Netanyahu can stay in power, while we have countries like the UK and their media trying to paint people like bobvylan as Bobby Villain as the villain, for their chants, death to the IDF, when really it's Israel that is acting unhinged and committing a genocide.
Now, Netanyahu's not coming for nothing. I'm sure he's not coming to Washington for a drink and a celebration. He's got America's complete support. Trump even threatened the judge that's dealing with Netanyahu's case, warned him to drop the charges, pardon Netanyahu. Well, that hasn't happened yet, but the court hearing a couple of days ago was postponed because of expected regional developments this week. This is the third visit of Netanyahu since Trump took office again. What do you think they're up to?
I think that Trump wants a war, an expanded war against Iran, and I think that Netanyahu wants more weapons and more cooperation from regional actors in the region. Just this week we had Syria's leader, Ahmed al-Shara, meet with Netanyahu as well, so that Israel can get their full cooperation in bombing Iran and also maybe handing over the Golan Heights to Israel. And so Netanyahu is trying to avoid any sort of criminal charges against him locally by the Israeli court. And so he is trying to expand and enter Israel in this endless war state, from continuing to bomb Lebanon, to bomb, to take as much land as they can from Syria, and to target and attack the people of Yemen and their leadership and their resistance there, continue its genocide, and expand the war against Iran. Netanyahu's, agenda in Iran has always been regime change, and they know they can't do that without the help of the United States to basically overthrow the government in Iran. And so that's what I believe that's going to be discussed this week. So that Netanyahu can continue to stay in power as long as he can, to continue the mass slaughter of Gaza and to continue these escalations, so that, while he is leading a military to ethnically cleanse Gaza.
I'll come back to Gaza in a minute, I promise you, but staying on the Iran track for a moment, it didn't work out well the last time. I mean, by all accounts, vast expenditure was made by Israel and by the American taxpayers, by extension, on trying to repel ballistic missile technology that was increasingly likely to hit its targets. And we now know that many of the targets that the Iranian missiles hit were extremely high value indeed. And that the Israeli public suffered huge economic losses and huge losses in morale. So if they hit Iran again, Iran's going to hit back again, just like they did the last time and maybe more. So how do Netanyahu and Trump win from that?
Well, they don't. It's more for this kind of political theater to show that they are, the leaders in military might around the world. I mean, we're talking about the United States that launched a war against, that is engaged in an endless war on terror. It, launched a war against Afghanistan, Iraq, overthrew the governments of Libya, engaged in a sectarian civil war in Syria. They're currently bombing Yemen. I mean, and then not to mention all of the NATO efforts and AFRICOM efforts across Africa and trying to overthrow the governments of Venezuela and Cuba and all the sabotage that they're involved in. And so this to me looks like just a military might show. But it's a war that I don't think that the US or Israel would win. I mean, the majority of the population around the world is against this escalation. They don't want this war. And so that's really what I think would happen.
Yeah, unfortunately, the majority and democracy and so on are of very little moment in these decisions. So this 60-day ceasefire that Netanyahu has agreed to, Trump triumphantly told us, there's no mention if the people that are fighting have agreed to it. Have you looked at the details in this ceasefire, Mnar?
No, I personally have not looked into the details of the ceasefire, but I do know that, Israel wants to continue to bomb and destroy as much as they can inside of Iran. That's why they've engaged in a lot of sabotage, working with Mossad to do internal destruction and car bombings and attacks on nuclear scientists. So based on Israel's history of ceasefires and them violating every single one when it comes to the war against, Lebanon or the war in Gaza, Israel is not to be trusted. And so whether a ceasefire will be signed or not, I think it will give some people some hope that this war is going to be over, but Israel and the United States will continue to be in a shadow war against Iran. The war against Iran did not just start in the last couple of weeks. I mean, Israel worked with the United States to assassinate Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in Trump's last term. And again, that was just a show of might on the behalf of the Trump administration, because after that, they kind of backed off and stopped. And Iran did respond kind of in an equal manner by targeting US bases, and then they also stopped. But Israel continued. They continued to assassinate nuclear scientists. They continue to fund groups like terrorist groups like the MEK to sabotage internally inside of Iran. And they're working actively on the ground in Iran to try to turn the citizens of Iran against their government to overthrow their government. But this time, what I'm seeing from speaking to regular Iranians is that even the ones that oppose the government, who are not happy with the government, they don't want the US and they don't want Israeli involvement in this war. They said, we have to take matters into our own hands, and the people of Iran should, in the end, decide their fate, not Western colonial powers like the United States and Israel.
Well, there's a lot of evidence that national unity in Iran is breaking out, as certainly I predicted before all this began would happen. Many Iranians are extremely religious, but many Iranians are extremely nationalistic, viscerally so. And what's happened, I think, is that both of these forces have fused together in rejection of this kind of bullying. Lastly, Mnar, I address you now as a woman journalist. I've lost hope that the media will ever become interested in beheaded children, at least not Palestinian ones that actually did exist before they were beheaded. I long ago gave up the idea that so-called feminists in the Western world would give a damn about the huge number of women murdered in Gaza. But this week, yesterday or the day before, an internet space filled with journalists and correspondents filing their stories, sitting trying to charge up their phones, was deliberately bombed in Gaza by Israel, and a huge flow of blood of journalists, broadcasters, and so on was running across the floor, out the doors, and into the sea. I haven't seen a single report about it in any Western media. So they don't even care that people like them are being massacred by Israel in Gaza. They're still talking about a guy, a rapper at Glastonbury, for God's sake. I mean, what do you make of the complete unwillingness of Western journalists to care even about the slaughter of other journalists?
Well, first of all, George, let's make one thing very clear. You specifically put every Western corporate media broadcaster and journalist to shame. And people like Piers Morgan and the BBC, journalists at the BBC, could learn a lot from you, because they're treating Bob Vylan's chant in Glastonbury, death to the IDF, as it was broadcasted live on the BBC, as if that is hate speech. Meanwhile, they want us to care about the baby killers, about the killers, the IDF mass murderers that are slaughtering our people in Gaza. These corporate media outlets pretend to care about so-called liberal values and feminism and women's rights, while Israel is systematically assassinating, they're targeting journalists on purpose so that their message cannot be broadcast to the world. And we have yet to hear from these corporate media outlets about anything that Israel has killed. I mean, the number last time, we spoke, it was like around over 200 journalists that Israel has attacked and killed. I'm sure that number is far higher now. And every single day we are witnessing the mass slaughter of more women, of more children who are getting their limbs blown off. Palestinian children is creating the world's largest cohort of amputees in modern history. And none of these crimes would even be possible without the support of the British state that is supplying the F-35 fighter jets to the Israeli military to drop bombs. And now the BBC and other pundits within British media want us to believe that the story here is Bob Vylan's chant in Glastonbury, death to the IDF. And they want us to defend the rights and the feelings of the soldiers that are mass murdering people in Gaza. We have to remember that just last week we had testimonies of Israeli soldiers that said that they were like the Nazis in Gaza and the Palestinians were the Jews. And so what Bob Vylan did is literally a bare minimum act of defiance by artists in the face of a genocide to draw attention to the British complicity and hypocrisy in the mass murder and slaughter of Palestinians. And something I just want to mention, the story here is, of course, not Bob Vylan, it's not kneecap, and it's definitely not Palestine action. It's the British politicians pushing to criminalize speech under the guise of fighting hate speech and anti-Semitism. The real story here is Israel's genocide and British and Western complicity. They are distracting us from the fact that not only should Israel and its politicians and military be tried for war crimes, but so should the Western governments, including the US and British state, for their assistance in this massacre. And now, just more irony and hypocrisy, the US State Department has actually revoked the visa of Bob Vylan from performing in the US because he's deemed as a dangerous individual, while you just mentioned to us, George, that war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu is scheduled to visit the United States later this month to talk about expanding more war. So once again, this is the hypocrisy, this is the moral depravity of Western democracies on full display.
Just incidentally, they have just murdered the head of the Indonesian hospital in Gaza, an eminent surgeon, the head of an Indonesian hospital, along with his wife and children. They have just murdered them. A senior medical figure in a hospital paid for by the most populous Muslim country in the world, namely Indonesia. There's no limits to these people. There is no restriction, no shame. That's the world that we're living in, and we're being asked to be on the side of the mass murderers of doctors and women and children and journalists and broadcasters and poets and painters. Well, it's quite a world, Mnar, and I'm grateful that we've got you to help us chart our way through it. Mnar Adley, founder and director of Mint Press News, a must-follow for everyone, and also behind the headlines. Is Trump losing it? 25,000 people have voted, and the great majority of you say yes. And a lot of the people who couldn't bring themselves to say yes say that they couldn't vote yes because he's not losing it. He lost it long ago, if he ever had it. Let me take a quick break. Your calls coming up next. Stay tuned.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. A big thank you to all our wonderful listeners, as the Mother of All Talk Shows podcast is now one of the most listened to political podcasts in the entire world. We are the #1 English-speaking political podcast in the Middle East, and in the last year alone have charted in the top 10 in podcast land in Pakistan, Russia, and China. Like, rate, and subscribe to the MOATS podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to be a part of the fastest rising independent news show in the world.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Well, you just heard about the podcast. Of course, if you missed the show, you can now download the podcast version every week, as thousands of people are doing by scanning the QR code on your screen. Now, this week, we are in the top 10 in the UAE, Egypt, South Africa, and Singapore. We're also in the charts for UK politics throughout June and now into July, which is also very good. You can listen to the weekly podcast via the moats.tv website, and once you've listened there, please don't forget to leave a review and rate it too. Now, let's stay in England for the first call in sunny Devon, where Katie wants to talk about Ehud Barak. Not often that happens, Katie. What have you got to tell us?
Okay. Hi, George. I'm so glad to be speaking to you because I'm really disturbed about what happened. Basically, last Wednesday, I went to Chalk Valley History Festival in Wiltshire for a family day out where there are living history displays, puppet shows, storytellers, and talks on history. And without any sort of prior knowledge or warning, I was really disturbed to find that Ehud Barak, IDF general and former Prime Minister of Israel, was speaking at the event. And his talk was entitled, but it was like nobody batted an eyelid. I'll carry on, but it's just so weird. His talk was entitled Israel, the Day After. What does it look like? How do we get there? So why is a mass murderer from a terrorist genocidal state speaking at a middle-class family event in Wiltshire in the middle of the week? His talk, of course, was really disturbing. So particularly his description of what Israel means by the two-state solution, which I was really shocked about because, of course, that's what all our politicians and media are supporting. But what he described was basically driving the Palestinians in the West Bank into an unspecified area and then, doing what they've done to Gaza, putting a great big kind of fence around it. And moving the settlers, he said 100,000 settlers off that part of land, and then so they can live in the promised land, as he kept calling it, our promised land. And then he said, because, it's not really a two-state, because people from Gaza and the West Bank can't visit each other. So what we're going to do is build a tunnel between Gaza and the West Bank so that no Palestinian can ever set foot in our promised land that God's given us, and so the Jews will be protected, and that the promised land will be 100% Jew and no percent Palestinian. So I didn't know that's what the two-state solution is.
Well, it's incredible. I mean, my first thought, Katie, is that he must be, with all respect to your event and with all respect to Wiltshire, he must be down on his luck, because once upon a time, this is a man that was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein and may indeed have been a partner in crime of Jeffrey Epstein, and is not just the most often cited visitor to the townhouse in Manhattan and to Epstein's Island. This is a guy who was operating at quite a high level, and as you say, was a former prime minister, former defense minister, and a war criminal. So how he ends up at a middle-class family event in Wiltshire is indeed a mystery, one that I'm not able to solve. But the politics of Ehud Barak are now so left field in Israel that he could not possibly even win a seat in the Knesset. Barak is talking to you about a two-state solution which is completely abandoned by almost everybody who's anybody in the Israeli political scene, and fully backed by the electorate. If you ran on a platform of linking the West Bank to Gaza in the way that he described to you by a tunnel, if you ran on a platform that you would set up an actual Palestinian state, however truncated, you would not get more than a handful of votes. That's the long and the short of it. As I said in the last show, Netanyahu is a monster, indeed a demon, may even be Satan himself. But there's people in his cabinet, many people in his cabinet, that are even more satanic than him. So congratulations, you just met the last remaining supporter of the Rabin and Perez Labour Party. They are history, Katie. The future belongs with the fascists in Israel. Thanks for that call. Fascinating, I found that. You can leave comments on the screen now, on the QR code, if you're watching on the YouTube stream, and I'll read them out. Shiaf Commandante says, I stand with Palestine Action. What will be my punishment? Nothing yet, I think, until it's gone through the House of Lords. Jack Klugman, great name, says they went for a cafe in Gaza with families and journalists using its rare internet access. 30 dead. and the UK provided the intel. And Crowhawk says Palestine Action are fulfilling their obligations under Article 1 of the UN Convention on Genocide, as are Yemen. And Adina Hon says, I'm ashamed by the Trump government to welcome this genocidal criminal Netanyahu into my country. And Snowman says, filthy traitors, Jordan, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. A new caller from Toronto, it's Ahmad on Iran and Israel. Welcome, Ahmad. Just take your time. Don't be nervous.
Thank you very much, George. Well, I'd like to give my point of view of analysis about the 12 days Israeli aggression against Iran. But first, I'd like to start with a brief story from Cuban general, for whom I have forgotten his name. This general was actually telling a story when he was a young officer just right after the Cuban Revolution, and he was stationed in an air base in Cuba. And he was saying, while a squadron of Soviet MiG-21 were patrolling Cuban airspace, 4 American F-4 fighter jets entered Cuban airspace illegally. Ignoring Cubans and Soviets warning, the leaders of the Soviet squadron asked the airbase permission to engage in a combat against the intruder. But as many of us know, the Soviets' policy of that time under Khrushchev was a non-confrontational. So the Soviet general, in response, told the leader of the Soviet pilots to drop the landing gears and land at the airbase. So the same young Cuban officer that now he's a general immediately called Fidel Castro and informed Fidel of the situation. Of course, Fidel was furious and yelling, saying the Americans were testing us as to whether we have the will to fight or not. And by not engaging them, we have signaled that we have no will to fight, and next time they will come with full force. So what Fidel did, he ordered the immediate removal of the Soviet general and told all the Cuban officers, when the Americans arrive, fire at them at will. So, of course, Fidel was right, as always he was. Just a few hours later, 2 American bombers escorted by 4 fighter jets entered Cuban airspace, and the Cubans immediately shot down a bomber where no American crew members survived. And the Americans learned that the Cubans meant business and immediately turned around. So this is one part of the scenario, and let's connect that to Iran. Ever since the triumph of the Iranian Revolution in 1979, the imperialism has been planning the overthrow of the Iranian Revolution and replace it with a puppet regime. This is not something new, and they will continue to do so. And in my opinion, Iranians have made several grave mistakes in the past, something that the Cubans would have never done. Just going to go to some of those mistakes. After the assassination of Qasem Soleimani in the hands of the Americans, the Iranians should have retaliated very hard, but they did not do that. Again, the Iranians did not retaliate hard once their embassy was hit by the Israeli in Damascus, Syria. All that led to the imperialist and his proxy regime in Israel to believe that the Iranians have no will to fight. Seeing that as a great opportunity, the imperialism moved to overthrow the government in Iran and replace it with a total sellout Reza Pahlavi, the former crown prince. On the other hand, the Iranians and Hezbollah in Lebanon were living in the glory of the defeat of Israel in 2006. Yes, Israel was defeated, but that does not mean they did not learn their lesson from that defeat. And what I'm trying to say, that both Iranians and the Hezbollah got a bit cocky, well, to a degree. On the other hand, trusting the International Atomic Energy Agency, knowing how this imperialist institution head by Max Hugh did to Saddam Hussein and trusting Rafael Grossi, the new head of atomic agency, was a total mistake. And what Grossi did to Iran was similar to what Hughes did to Iraq. One would expect the Iranian be clever enough to know this. Now, what was the Israelis/imperialist intention? The main reason for the Israeli attack was to overthrow the government in Iran, and that was the prime reason. Once they installed a puppet regime in Iran, the Iranian nuclear drama for the imperialism would be over. The Israelis' plan was to target all pillars of the system by assassinating as many Iranians, military and nuclear officials. The initial aim was to cause a shock and to deliver a severe blow to the Iranian apparatus to create chaos. So the Iranian people start to uprise. Their plan did not materialize. Not only people did not uprise, but instead they came to the defense of the homeland. Iran retaliated, but this time very hard. Iran stepped out of the shock rapidly, and the coherence of the Iranians and their ability to restore itself caught the Israelis and the imperialism by surprise. The level and the intensity of the devastation to Israel by the Iranian retaliation was never expected. For the first time in Israel history.
Well, look, I can't believe, Ahmad, that I invited you not to be nervous, because nervous is the last thing that you are. You made a very great many very powerful points. Time is against me in dealing with them seriatim. I make this observation. Any country is entitled to fight any adversary that invades its airspace. It has the right to go to war against any country that is an aggressor against it, but it doesn't have the right to drag another country into a war. So the Soviet Union did not want to go to what would have become thermonuclear war with the United States, on the principle, I suppose, that they didn't want the world to end. They still believed there was a world to be won. So the Cubans were perfectly entitled to shoot down anything that moved over their airspace, but you can't complain that the Soviet Union didn't want to do that. The Cuban Revolution would never have survived if it were not for the Soviet Union, and indeed the very Khrushchev you implicitly criticize guaranteed that there would never be another Bay of Pigs. He got Kennedy to agree to that. And so the Cuban Revolution survived and survives still. The mistakes, as you described them, of the Iranian government and the Lebanese resistance movement, well, you've made your point. I'm not really in a position to second guess you, except I want to say this. No nuclear scientist, no general, no senior officer of the Iranian armed forces should be living in their apartments with their wives, with their children. Anybody who could be a target for Israeli attack must be living underground in a bunker. That's what happens when you're a leader in a war. And far too many revolutionary people in Lebanon, in Iran, in Gaza, elsewhere, have been easily taken out by the murderers of the Israeli invasion, Israeli occupation force. So let's hope that lesson has been learned, because that was one hell of a long funeral in Tehran this past week. That was Ahmad in Toronto, a first-time caller. Something tells me he'll not be slow in coming back. Thanks, Ahmad, for that. A big shout out to all the big MOATS donors this week who donated on the MOATS.tv website. And we need your donations. And so I'm particularly grateful to James Brogan, Colin Hall, Sam Eli, Paul Peterson, and a wonderful £20 donation from my good friend Aziz Mehmet. You've all been so generous. Thank you so much. Please do become a MOATS donor tonight and give what you can to support the show. Idris is in Bolton on Iran. Go ahead, Idris.
Hi, George. It's always a pleasure. Thank you. So I'm puzzled with something. I'm struggling with something, George. With respect to Iran, air supremacy is a massive issue, isn't it? The Israelis had complete carte blanche on Iranian airspace. What I'm struggling with is why is there a struggle with Iran acquiring some Su-35s from the Russians? Any idea what's going on there, George?
I haven't seen anything official from either government, but I do see chatter on the internet that Iran is angry with Russia, that Russia didn't support it well enough, that it dragged its feet on the Su jets. I do see chatter that Iran is switching to Chinese military purchases, particularly their new fifth-generation fighter planes. And it was one of the main issues of the 12-day war, that the Israelis had apparently free rein. One F-35 was brought down. That's not a small thing. There were reports of two more, but I haven't seen that confirmed in any way. But they did have free rein over whatever site in Iran they chose to bomb. And that should not be the case. Israel brought down, let's be generous, and say 50% of Iranian ordnance fired in retaliation, which means that 50% got through and a lot of devastation it caused. But if Israel can have air defenses that at least stop half of an attacker's ordnance falling on their people and things, there's no reason why Iran should have been left in such a parlous state. It might be that the Russians were at fault. It might be that the Iranian government was at fault. Perhaps the Iranian government was not willing to go all in with Russia, because some parts of the Iranian government, before this 12-day war, were still very hopeful that they could reorientate themselves westward, that they could, by pursuing reformist policies, that they could repair their relations with the West. We're not ready to go all in with the East. I expect they don't think that now. Idris, thanks for the call. Is Trump losing it? 27,000 people have voted now. Let's get that to 30,000 in the next 40 minutes or so. I've got to take a break because Pulitzer Prize winner Chris Hedges, political commentator, journalist, writer, and host of the Chris Hedges Report, is up next. You don't want to miss him. Stay tuned. A big thanks to the people who support me on the Patreon page. I really have come to depend on the income from that. It costs £1 a week, not even the price of a cup of coffee in an insalubrious cafe. If you think you could stretch to that, please support me on Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. Now, the MOATS team have added a tiered system on my Patreon page where you can become an official MOATS graduate. How about that? I speak as someone who graduated from nowhere, from the factory floor in Michelin. But you can become a MOATS graduate and legend. You can give a regular donation to support the show and my work. You can now upgrade from a mere Patreon to a MOATS graduate at £10 a month, as opposed to £5 a month, I think it is, and you can receive official MOATS legend status for £20.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Chris Hedges, who should be at Foggy Bottom as Secretary of State in a sane United States government, is instead here on the mother of all talk shows, trying to find us through the fog of war. And very happy we are always, Chris, to see you. Let's start, as I did with Mnar Adley, with the speculation mounting that the US is about to attack Iran again. Why would they do that when the Donald Trump military skills that were demonstrated, hitting a refrigerator door from 50,000 feet, were greater than Alexander the Great, greater than any triumph of any military leader ever? Well, why attack them again?
I think what we're going to see is the kind of pattern that defines Israel throughout the region. It violates every ceasefire agreement it signs. This is true whether that's with Hamas, with Lebanon, or with anyone else. And what this strike has done is essentially opened up this very familiar pattern that we've seen. Lebanon would be a good example, but Gaza would be another, where just periodically you begin to strike. It's, of course, what they did in Syria after the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad. They essentially neutralized Syrian military positions and outposts, airfields, and everything else. And that phrase, mowing the lawn, they use for Gaza to sort of keep Palestinians in Gaza constantly subjugated. I think that's writ large now throughout the region. Why would they attack? Well, because from all reports, they may have set back a nuclear. Well, first of all, let's be clear. There's no evidence that Iran is building a nuclear weapon, number one. Number two, they have every right to build a nuclear weapon. But it was they did not wipe it out, despite all of the hyperbole that Trump used to describe the mission. And I think it's also clear that this attack was probably primarily about regime change. I mean, they don't know how to read Iran. I worked in Iran. They don't get it. And that's why you saw so much of the leadership taken out. No, this is the opening salvo in what I fear will be a kind of a permanent, although periodic, war against Iran that, of course, Israel will try and suck the United States into. And Trump, being kind of clueless, will probably do it.
So all that talk from Trump over the last few days about negotiations and so on, that was all nonsense. They were always planning to return to the scene of their crimes.
Well, remember that when Israel first struck Iran, that was 2 days before they were supposed to meet in Oman to continue the negotiation. I mean, let's go all the way back, which of course you're well aware of, George, is that Iran signed under the Obama administration a nuclear agreement that it abided by. And Trump just willfully kind of ripped it up. And then of course Trump was saying he wasn't going to attack for 2 weeks, and but it's all a subterfuge. They don't take negotiations seriously. I'm talking about Israel and probably the United States, and I think that's something that we've seen throughout the 20 months of genocide, where there's been a kind of almost open ridicule on the part of the Israeli government towards any kind of ceasefire deal. Remember, there was a few months ago where they cut a deal, and then the Netanyahu government just immediately walked back from the very provisions that they'd agreed in. So, but that's just typical. I mean, you can go all the way back to Camp David, Oslo. Israel will sign agreements. They're always phased. the first phase gives them what they want, and then let's take Gaza. In that case, it's the hostages, and then they ignore every other phase, which is what happened in the last ceasefire in Gaza. So Israel has never abided by these agreements ever, and I don't expect that to change. And the United States is clearly in the pocket of Israel. It's nothing new.
Yeah, so you wouldn't be heartened by the news that Trump is trumpeting, that he's gotten Netanyahu to agree to a 60-day ceasefire. Has he, first of all? Have the other party to the conflict agreed to it? Will Israel stick to it? What's in this deal for either side or both?
Well, the remaining hostages. So what's the number now? 20 that are purported to be alive? That's what's in the deal. Netanyahu, I mean, there's nothing left of Gaza. It's been completely destroyed. 90% of the population has been displaced. They're living in under tarps or tents or amid the rubble. There's nothing left to bomb except the people of Gaza, which is, of course, now what's happening with this very cynical, Gaza Humanitarian Aid Foundation. But that's just baiting. That's luring Gaza out of the north so that it can be completely occupied and annexed by Israel. You get thousands, probably tens of thousands, since March 2nd. Of course, there's been no food. So 500,000 Palestinians now stand on the brink of starvation. They're lured into the south for 1 hour. There isn't anywhere enough food. There's only 4 aid hubs. The UN used to have 400, but that's not what the point is. The point is to, I think what Chris Gunnis called it, aid washing. Well, it's just to cover up the fact of that Israel has now weaponized starvation. And they use, this was an article in Audits, a very good article, that talked about how soldiers willfully fire on the crowds to keep them back for that 1 hour, which is often 2 a.m. And then as soon as the hour is up, they just fire again. And in the Audits article, they said, we don't just open up with guns, we open up with machine guns and mortars. And dozens of people are killed and wounded every day. But it is, Israel clearly is moving now, and of course we've seen increased activity in the West Bank to drive the Palestinians out. How is that going to happen? I don't know that Israel even knows. They want to push them into the Sinai. They've negotiated, of course, with Sudan, Somalia, Somaliland. They don't really care where they go, as long as they go somewhere. But you will reach a point, where mass starvation, when your choice is between dying of mass starvation or leaving, there will be many, many people who, just save their children and perhaps themselves will leave. But there's no impediment, and no ceasefire deal, nothing is going to stop Israel's plan. The only thing that will stop it is cutting off the weapons supplies, which the United States and the UK and Germany have no intention of doing.
Looking at Trump's increasingly zany pronouncements and behavior, 6 weeks ago, he turned the White House into an electric car showroom. And today he said nobody wants electric cars. And in the interim, Elon Musk went from his BFF to his biggest enemy. He's now threatening, like a cheap mafia don, he's now threatening Musk with deportation or worse. He's fallen out with this Congressman, Thomas Massey, who seems to be the perfect embodiment of the America First agenda. He's now spending heaven and earth to destroy him. He's falling out with his friends. He's contradicting himself daily, if not hourly. Is Trump going mad, or is there a method in this madness?
Well, you used the right word, George. It's a mafia. It's the way it works. And it's either you kiss the ring, and you kiss the ring obsequiously and constantly, or you're out. That's really the only kind of political, I don't want to call it sophistication, but the political agenda that Trump has. And you can see it when in these cabinet meetings. It looks like I covered Ceausescu's Romania. Everybody just sitting there, who can fawn over the great leader more, who can be more obsequious than anyone else. whether you're competent, most of them not. Nothing else counts. Nothing else matters. And so I think that's what you're seeing. I don't think there's any real.
What a great pity. We've lost Chris, but we will get back to him, I promise you, because that was getting very interesting indeed. Is Trump losing it? Yes or no? On Telegram, 90% say yes. On X, 77% say yes. On the YouTube community poll, 85%. And on the YouTube stream, 87% say yes, he is. If you want to alter that result in any way, then get your calls in, get your votes in rather, in the next 20 minutes or so. We've got Chris back on the line. Thank God for that. Chris, you were just explaining the cheap mafia behavior of Trump, and you were comparing him to Ceausescu, which I personally think was a bit unfair to Ceausescu. But the Trump political base is splintering under the pressure of all this, is it not? Is he burning capital? And if so, for what? For why?
Of course he's burning capital because he's betrayed his base, especially with this new bill, which is going to slash all sorts of programs that his base depends on. But he doesn't care because essentially he's destroyed what's left of the machinery. There wasn't much left. The machinery of a democratic system. And I mean, he's talking about stripping citizenship from the Mamdani, the Democratic candidate for the position of mayor in New York. I mean, we're just moving at a kind of galloping pace towards this repugnant authoritarianism, in which case the base doesn't matter. But yes, of course, it's a complete betrayal of the base. The base is fragmenting, but that doesn't matter anymore because the base doesn't have any say. And just to be clear, the base has no say either in the Democratic Party. 77% of registered Democrats wanted an arms embargo on Israel, but Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, who are all owned by the Israel lobby, could care less. So this is not a new phenomenon within America's decayed political system, but it's going to be more enhanced or more accelerated than it was in the past. But yes, you're completely right. The base is figuring out that it's betrayed, but it's also about to figure out that there's nothing they can do about it.
Well, nothing at the moment, but of course elections come along in the United States rather often, and that normally isn't a problem either because people can't get on the ballot, they can't raise the money to fight elections to win. But we've now got this wounded shark in the water by the name of Elon Musk. He's promising to set up the Americaparty. He's promising to put up the money to primary these Republican candidates that claim to be in favor of balancing the budget, but are voting for this absurdly titled Big Beautiful Bill. Is that anything to be cheerful about, the launch of the Americaparty? What impact would it have, Chris?
I don't think it would have a huge impact. It is true he has a lot of money, but he doesn't have much else, including common sense or much political savvy. I mean, let's be clear, the Democratic Party, which you cited in terms of the upcoming midterm elections, they have zero credibility as well. I think their approval rating is, if I remember correctly, is about 27%, or it's very, very low. Then because they've also betrayed the American population. I don't see, if there's any hope, I see it in Zoran Mamdani, the person who led a grassroots campaign, self-described democratic socialist, who really has thrown the ruling elites into shock, both the Democratic elites and the Republican elites. Cuomo, his candidate, former governor of New York, outspent him 20-1, and was backed by all of the Democratic Party establishment, which, by the way, has not endorsed Mamdani, even though he won the Democratic primary. So, we're going to have to build a counterweight, which will have to be wedded very closely with labor, because the only power we really have is the strike. If there's any hope or glimmer of hope, it comes out of that, but not Elon Musk. He can. I mean, Michael Bloomberg, remember, George, tried to buy himself a presidential nomination. I don't believe him. I think, what did he get, one delegate or something? I mean, not that money isn't important. Yeah. It is important.
It was a miserable failure.
But Musk is not a political animal. He's he tried to fund this election. Was it in Michigan, I believe, or Minnesota? I can't remember. And it just fell flat on its face. So, while yes, money is key, I don't. And also, there are all sorts of ways Trump can use the federal government to punish Musk, and he will. He will. He's very, very vindictive.
Mamdani is indeed an interesting fellow, and he ran a wonderful campaign. I've looked at some of his campaign ads. They're the best political ads I've ever seen, albeit too long for commercial use, but on social media they really, really worked. But that's in New York. Does Mamdani play in Peoria?
That's a good question. New York is New York. It's kind of not America. I mean, it's kind of like what Berlin was in Weimar. I think that it ultimately will play because I think that he appealed to the distress that the working poor and the working class are under, with very concrete and real proposals. I think the Democrats would have easily swamped Trump if they had offered the kind of FDR New Deal type proposals that the Democratic Party that used to define the Democratic Party. But they won't do that because, of course, they're owned by Goldman Sachs and the billionaire class. And that's always been, worked for Ralph Nader. That was always Nader's argument, that if they went back and appealed, but they can't, because then they're talking about the Democrats, their base would walk out on them. But I think that economic populism is the most effective strategy we have in order to wrest back the working class from these proto-fascists and Christian fascists that, because of the betrayal by the Democratic Party, have essentially seized that electorate and essentially weaponized that very legitimate rage that they have at the ruling elites, and not just the Democratic Party elites, but remember the establishment Republican elites, the George Bushes and the Mitt Romneys and the Liz Cheneys, who have just migrated to the Democratic Party and are now honorary members of the Democratic Party. I mean, they spoke at the convention, and Kamala Harris kept running around talking about how proud she was that Dick Cheney, who's a war criminal and left office with, I think, a 13% approval rating, endorsed her. But I look at that whole ruling class as just a corpse. And what hope I have will come from these grassroots movements that are speaking in a very real way to the economic stagnation, the frustration, the sense of betrayal that grips most of the country.
Chris Hedges, as always, dazzling tour of the horizon. Thanks very much for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Let me take a quick break. Your calls next, all the way to Gayatri with the social media news roundup. Stay tuned.
What a great show this is! I listened to it, I thought, wow, what a great show. I've called into your show today, George, because I'm a great caller. Probably the greatest caller you've ever had. I really am. The only way your show could be better is if it had more of me, Donald J. Trump, in it. You keep talking about me, George. You do. I've heard it, I have. So many of the American people, the best people, listen to your show. And I've heard them crying about me. I have, and I listen and I go, ooh, America, don't cry. Don't cry. You need to be careful what you say about me, George. You don't want me to put a tariff on your show like I did with China. And then you'll come running for my help, just like little Zelensky. You know, I know you will. I know these things. Make the mother of all talk shows great again. That's why we're here. That's what we're gonna do, George. We're gonna boost your ratings. Donald is gonna boost them bigly. I'm giving your show the Trump bump. You're welcome, George. Thank me. And remember, nobody talks like me, nobody calls like me, and absolutely nobody ends a phone call like me. I'm hanging up now, not because I finished, but because I won.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Is Trump losing it? Yes or no? Get your votes in on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. We want to get this poll over 30,000 votes. Another new caller, again from Canada. Kazi in Canada on Palestine. Go ahead, Kazi.
Hey, George. How are you doing today?
All good,
Hello?
by the grace of God. What would you like to say?
Hey, George. Recently, our Prime Minister, Mark Carney, made a comment about Israel and Palestine when the journalist asked him why he's not declaring Palestine as a state. His response was he doesn't feel that Israelis are safe from Palestinians and Palestinians are not safe from Israel. But he had no hesitation to declare Israel as a state. And George, you know, my family is from Bangladesh. We fought our liberation war in 1971. And if you look at history, during that war, all the freedom fighters from my home country, we were called militants. We were called, like, I don't know if we were called terrorists or not, but people used to, like, America was against our liberation. So they dehumanized the freedom fighters. And I feel like that's exactly what the Western media is trying to do with Hamas. Yes, Hamas might have attacked Israel, but like they're in a war, in my opinion, and war is violence. So blatantly just calling them terrorists and not calling Netanyahu the same thing, I think that's like so much morally wrong. And like our Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister of Canada, he had no hesitation to just say that, okay, I'm going to declare Israel as a state, but Palestine, okay, they're not ready. Like, at what point they will be ready? They keep killing more people. The violence will never stop like this. Israel is the aggressor. They're the more powerful country. I think they should, make the first step to step down or even surrender at this point. They need to give up the Palestinian lands that they have been occupying for so long. And being a Bangladeshi myself...
They'll never do that until the Western countries that make it all possible require them to. And even then, perhaps not, because unwisely, like Dr. Frankenstein, they have created a monster in the case of Israel. And so even if all their Western backers, facilitators, funders, armorers, shill brigades were to demand that they step back, there's no guarantee now that they would do it. They might choose instead the Samson option of bringing the entire world down on top of themselves and on top of the rest of us. So we are in a real pickle with them, no doubt at all about that. I would say that Mark Carney is not only no better than the joker that was there before Trudeau, he's not as bad as what's coming next. The political class in Canada is so bankrupt, so corrupted, so wicked, that it's difficult to see where that country is going to go next. And that's if Donald Trump doesn't turn you into the 51st state of the Union. Kazi, thanks. Now look, there's a No to NATO, No to War show tomorrow night at 9 p.m. on my YouTube channel. NATO Strikes Back. And this week, two fantastic speakers. Yvonne Ridley, a very long-time colleague of mine, one of my longest-serving comrades in arms, and Patrick Walsh, two top speakers, are on the show. So that's 9 o'clock on my YouTube channel. That's No to NATO, No to War. Never been more important. Let me go to Panama, where the fragrant Donna wants to talk about Ted Cruz. Go ahead, Donna.
I really don't want to talk about Ted Cruz, but I feel I must. He was my senator at one point because I am a native of Texas originally, although I lived in New York City for 20 years. But anyway, you mentioned him and the Tucker Carlson, how many people live in Iran debacle of a debate. And you said, I mean, this guy is Catholic, and why doesn't he Well, he actually is not. He's never been Catholic. His father is a pastor. He became an evangelical, dispensationalist, dominionist pastor, non-denominational. In 2004, he converted. His father, now Pastor Rafael Cruz, converted from Catholicism, which he, grew up with in Cuba, to becoming an evangelical Christian because he went to Bible study with a friend, with a colleague, and found this incredible peace and decided he needed a personal relationship with Jesus Christ and became a born-again Christian. And during his second marriage, the marriage to Ted Cruz's mother, they talked about the Bible a lot at the dinner table, and I would call Ted Cruz in his office in Washington, D.C. as a constituent, because he was one of my two senators, unfortunately. And it was quite interesting. I mean, I was careful to be polite and not to be seem agitated or too emotional or anything. I of course I didn't speak with him. I spoke with his interns, his aides, and I was always very careful to be polite. And I mentioned it to the aide. I said, Ted Cruz's mother graduated from Rice University, as did my mother, and, just trying to schmooze a little. And then, I would talk to him about his support for Israel, which, of course, I encouraged him to stop supporting Israel. And I would talk to him occasionally about they should not get rid of something about guns, about the bump stocks and, the way that they get guns to really act like machine guns, which is a lot of the school shooters, would have these, hyped up rifles, and they were just like machine guns. They would set off, 60 rounds in 35 seconds or something. Anyway, and so the young man, one time, well, first of all, about Israel, the intern said to me, Senator Cruz is never going to stop supporting Israel. I mean, he just said that flat out. Like, he said, I will pass this on, but he will never stop supporting Israel. So there you go. And then the next time, the man was arguing with me about magazines and bump stocks and this and this and this. And I said, sir, I think I better hang up now. And he goes, yeah, you really should.
Oh, Donna, hope you haven't hung up on me.
What?
How bizarre is that? I hope you didn't hang up on me.
Well, I mean, I'm not a multimillionaire, and I'm also not like the head of a group of Purifying the Fire ministries like Ted's father. I don't represent, say, 45 5,000 member evangelical churches in Texas. So, I'm nobody. According to him, I'm nobody. and he's trained his
well,
interns.
you're certainly not nobody. You're
that
certainly
way.
not nobody on this show. But Donna, I'll tell you what. It's good that you corrected me. I did think he was a Roman Catholic. I racially profiled him, you could say, thinking that as a Cuban American, he would be bound to be a Catholic. And by telling me that, in fact, he's the product of some weird evangelical Bible-belting, Bible-thumping, happy, clappy, Floridian. I better not insult them anymore. But you certainly have educated me, and I think the rest of us. Donna in Panama, always a wonderful caller. Comments tonight on the Chris Hedges interview. Sativa Girl says, harboring, aiding, abetting war criminals. Pam Bondi has got you covered. What happened to the Epstein list that she had on her desk? And Jan D'Souza says Americans who supported Trump are angry about him raising the deficit. We do not support the Zionists. Don't conflate with Jews. We do not support war. And Terry Love, Senegal, says Max Blumenthal reported that Susie Wiles, the White House Chief of Staff, used to work for Netanyahu and is isolating him and keeping him focused on U.S. whims. Well, that might or might not be so, but I'm always suspicious of the good czar, bad advisors. If only Rasputin hadn't got too close to the royal family, they'd have been great. Uzi 1mm says Trump playing zero. You know how they're always saying he's playing 5D chess? Uzi says Trump is playing 0D chess. And Frank Rockefeller sends $5. Thanks, Frank. Says strategic wars, the result of dollar sovereignty and its political inflation, protecting the servile welfare state. Fiat currency sustained by wars. Now, Frank, if you're a member of the famous Rockefeller family, maybe you could get in touch and we could expand that $5 a bit. But I'm grateful for it anyway. Amir is in London on Israel-Palestine. Go ahead, Amir.
Dear George, it's a profound honor to be speaking to you finally. Your voice is really a beacon of truth against the Western hypocrisy. And I'd like to say a few things. First is that, as you know, the Zionist movement started in the early 1900s with Theodore Herzl. And that when he was trying to push for the Zionist movement to move the Jews back to their homeland, their promised land, he was faced with, first he went to the Ottoman Sultan at that time, as he was ruling over Palestine, and he said that there is no way that he would ever sell Palestine to them. So then he tried to go through the Germans, and that didn't work. So then the World War I happened, and the Balfour Declaration, right? But then the Jews weren't allowed to move in directly. And in hindsight, I'm saying that World War I and World War II were the most profound things that happened for the creation of Israel. I understand and I agree that what happened with the Jews was a horrific incident, and that it should never be forgotten, and that Jews and Zionists should be separated completely. But also, the word Holocaust means a burnt sacrifice offered to God. That's the original meaning of the word Holocaust. And if you think about it and how the Zionists are always using the anti-Semites, that they're victims of everything, and that basically they're always trying to be a victim in everything that happens, even though they're not, like, if something normal happens, they still try to find a way to victimize themselves. And also that during World War II, most of the Jews living in Eastern Europe were against Zionism. So they did not
Amir,
want...
this is turning out to be a bad line. I think we've got your point, and I'll comment on the last of the issues you raised. Jews were overwhelmingly against Zionism. And indeed, until comparatively recent times, a very substantial percentage of the Jewish community was leftist, was anti-Zionist. The Soviet Jews, for example, were a very good example, but the Jews in the East End of London, for example, your own city, were the people who elected communist MP Phil Paratin in 1945. They elected communist councillors in the East End of London, and they were anti-Zionist. So Zionism has not been completely hegemonic in the Jewish community until comparatively recent times. And even now, there is a very substantial number of highly religious Jews, Hasidic Jews, who, for reasons of religion, completely reject Zionism, completely reject Israel, oppose it, root and branch, refuse to serve in its army, and so on. And they number many hundreds of thousands. And bear in mind that the Jewish population of Israel is some 7-8 million people. A community of hundreds of thousands is statistically a significant one. And they maintain, and I've met many of them, the most virulent opposition to the crimes of Israel. I saw one young man from one of these sects on a video today, coming from Jerusalem, I presume, in which he denounced the Zionists for making the whole world hate the Jews. And he was not wrong about that, I'm sorry to say. If there is a rise in anti-Semitism in the world, well, the principal reason for that is the deliberate attempt to conflate Israel with Jews, Zionism with Judaism, the deliberate attempt to imply, in fact, explicitly state that Israel is the Jewish state. It is the state of the Jews, meaning that all the Jews in the world are only temporarily where they are. One day they must make aliyah and come up to Israel. This is very dangerous stuff. And these Orthodox Jews recognize that completely. But there's also a huge number of secular Jews in Britain and in the United States, and therefore, I presume, elsewhere, who are increasingly hostile to Israel. Even in the United States, the majority of young Jews have nothing but hatred for Netanyahu and for the genocide that has been carried out. Now, if I was to hazard a guess, I'd say that 75% of the Jews in the world are Zionist. But that means that 25% of them are not Zionist, and many of that 25% are very firmly hostile to Zionism. So keeping the two issues of religion and nationalism apart are very, very important, and important to me, and I'm glad also to you. Amir, thanks for that call. Now, look, a big, big thanks on air to tonight's top donors who've been on to the MOATS.tv website. Dan Church, Thomas McIntosh, Emmanuel Ben Israel, Paul Wilson, and Henry Watson. You are a brilliant bunch. Thank you very much indeed for your generosity. Please, before the end of the night, leave something on MOATS.tv, even if it's £1, $1, or €1. Another new caller. I'm blessed. Ohud in Texas on the Middle East. Go ahead, Ohud.
Hi, George. How are you? How are you doing?
By the grace of God, good. Nice to hear from you. What do you want to say?
I just want to say that we love you a long, long time ago. We've been following you since I was back in Jordan. My dad loved you so much, and we were watching you. You are the first European people we hear that talk about the Palestinians. They talk about their problem with Israel. We didn't hear anything from any European person before you. And we've been following you since the 90s and even before. And we love how much you did for the Palestinian and the Palestinian cause, and everything happened to the Palestinians. And we love this a lot, and we appreciate everything you did. And we are here standing for the Palestinians, standing for Gaza and what happened with them. And we really want the entire world to be with us and to see what's happening. And we realize a lot of changes since then, and a lot of things happened. The whole image has changed since October 7th. People are moving more towards the truth and what's happening back in Gaza. A lot of people that were not even able to talk about this case before, and now they're talking, they're shouting, they're marching, and this is really give us a hope that Palestinian people will get justice one day, and I hope it's soon, but we're still waiting, and we hope that more and more people will come out and talk about it, and we appreciate this show that really bring a very critical subject that people would like to hear about.
Ameen. Thank you very much indeed. It's very heartening to hear what you say coming from Texas. I have spoken in Texas many times, actually, in the run-up to the Iraq War, and then later. I was actually speaking in Texas when the news of the Israeli piratical attack on the Turkish aid ship, the Mavi Marmara, took place, in which my own parliamentary assistant was one of the victims, dragged to a prison cell in Ashkelon. I was on my feet talking in Texas when that happened. I had a very good friend, very strong, big, strong Palestinian champion who was unfortunately killed. So I shouldn't go further into that for the sake of his family. But I love the people of Texas. I love the state of Texas. I just don't love Ted Cruz. And I doubt if you do either. Do this for me. Spread the word everywhere in America about this show. And if anyone's got $1 they can spare, get them to send it in so that we can keep going. God bless you and your family. Thanks very much. Let's go back to England, Preston, where Adam wants to talk about Keir Starmer. Go ahead, Adam.
Hello.
Hi, you're on the air. Go ahead.
I think Keir Starmer needs to resign immediately. Labour were in opposition for 14 years, and this past year has been nothing short of a disaster. I think he has to go. Heads must roll tonight. He's completely out of his depth.
As I always say, deputy heads must roll. He's not going to make his own head roll, and the MPs don't have the guts to remove him. But this government's going to be the death of the Labour Party, Adam, and frankly speaking, I'm very glad about it. What about you?
Yeah, I've been a Labour supporter all my life, and I regret voting for them. What I don't understand is, George, they've been in the opposition for 14 years, right? So they must have known right and wrong. Right now, they don't know what they're doing. After 14 years of looking at what Conservatives are doing, you'd think Keir Starmer and the Labour Party would bring some real changes, but it's been anything short of real changes with the economy, what they're doing with the benefits, the illegal immigrants coming in. They've got it all wrong. I just don't know how and what the next 4 years hold with the Labour Party in power?
Well, very, very bad indeed, Adam. Everything that they accused the Conservatives of going to be doing, they have done it. They said that the Tories would cut the cold weather payment for our pensioners. The Tories didn't, but Labour did. They said that the Tories would attack the disabled people for the black hole, for the abolition of national insurance. The Tories didn't, but Labour did. They are bigger supporters, certainly financially, of Israel and Ukraine than the Tories were. So it's one thing saying, okay, we're two cheeks of the same backside, but our cheek is slightly more attractive, so vote for us. But in fact, they're even more unattractive than the Conservatives were. Rishi Sunak has got nothing on Keir Starmer. So I think the Uni Party is coming rapidly to an end. The Conservatives and Labour will both die as a result of their joint and several failures on the economy, on foreign policy, on immigration, and all the other things that you mentioned. So I'm a happy man about that. It doesn't mean that my party, the Workers' Party of Britain, is going to sweep to power. I'm not saying that. Although if we get the right by-election in the right place, you might find me back in Parliament before long. Adam in Preston, I hope you'll join us. But I'm joined by Gayatri in the studio with the social media news roundup. What's rattling, Gayatri?
I want to talk about Trump's peace deal.
The
one that he is claiming the Nobel Peace Prize for.
Yeah, but
not the one
I've
in
lost
Iran.
track. Yeah, I've lost track.
I want to talk about the one that he brokered for Rwanda and the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo.
I don't know about that. Tell me.
This happened earlier this week, and well, it's really gone to the background. It's between. So they are priding themselves for ending a 30-year conflict in the Great Lakes between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And critics have observed that in exchange for that, he accessed...
Oh, not rare earth materials again.
$2 trillion worth of earth minerals.
Wow.
Which is 1/10 of the DRC's whole mineral wealth.
That's quite a heist.
Yes, it's quite a heist indeed, and this is to broker the peace between the M23 rebels and the FDLR. It's quite a tricky but it's tricky and unbelievable, but also believable because it's the same playbook, isn't it? You support a terror group, cause disruption, a country cannot develop, it cannot stabilize, and then you offer a peace deal, and then you stop supporting the rebels and you stop the conflict, just like that, overnight.
I thought the best joke was the Nobel Peace Prize Committee meeting saying we better give it to Trump or he'll bomb us. I haven't followed that peace deal, but I've got very grave doubts that it will bring any peace, and it certainly won't bring any justice to the long-suffering people of the Congo.
No, exactly. One of the reasons they kept it hush-hush, I guess, is because when China made a deal with the DRC in 2008 or so, it was for way less, 200 times less. It was only for $9 billion. And that was in exchange for infrastructure development. There's a lot of critique about that. Oh, this is a new Chinese colonization of Africa, they were claiming.
Yeah, right.
But now, it's going to be peace. And $2 trillion access of mineral wealth.
Yeah, these rare earth minerals are, of course, the reason why the Congo has been torn apart for decades by colonial powers and their proxies in Africa trying to get control of them. Indeed, it's the reason why Patrice Lumumba was overthrown and murdered and mutilated, massacred in the first place because of the copper in the Katanga province. That was the lever that they used to try to destroy the Congo. Then they put in the world's worst dictator, Mobutu, and he just looted the country and gave the money away and salted it away in Western countries and so on. So now the Orange Man is running the Congo.
Yes, and it is in Patrice Lumumba's honor I want to mention this, because it is today his 100th birthday.
Patrice?
It is Patrice Lumumba's, the first prime minister of the Congo, before he was assassinated, as you said, in 1961.
Wow.
So he's turning in his grave because his country has not followed in his footsteps. Another African leader, however, has, three of them in the Sahel. Captain Ibrahim Traoré in particular, he quoted, "The United States has facilitated peace agreement between Rwanda and the DRC. The US is to receive a lot of mineral rights from the deal. Two African nations couldn't resolve the issues here at home in Africa. Next door neighbors had to fly over oceans to the US to go and discuss and surrender up the mineral beneath their soils. Until Africa learns to see each other as family and not let strangers settle family disputes, Africa shall continue to be a pawn on the chessboard."
Well, I'm going to predict that just as Trump will collect none of the rare earth minerals in the Ukraine, he won't pick up many in the Congo either. That's my prediction. Have you got one more for me before I take you out on this fine evening for a bag of chips?
Let me get a comment on tonight's poll, whether Trump is losing it. This is a very interesting one from Teresa Kelly, because she says, before the internet, those of us living in New York City had to read in the various daily trash newspaper his never-ending, pathetic attempts to be in the headlines. The arrogant, delusional, and narcissistic serial liar bragged about how no news is bad news. As long as they are talking about you, you're a winner, good or bad. Since he has never hidden the fact that he is spiritually bankrupt, and since no one but Hitler has been able to win as many souls for Lucifer as has Trump, it is obvious to anyone with a strong connection to their heart mind versus their egoistic brain mind, the true art of the deal Antichrist Trump successfully mastered with ease while declaring bankruptcy on every business he ever launched.
Yeah, people tell you, he's such a great businessman. I think he went bankrupt 8 times, leaving ordinary people, tradesmen, and small businesses owed a fortune. Well, we knew that he was what he was. It seems to me he's now losing what he was. He did have certain insurrectional instincts and skills, but he has definitely lost them. He's lost the will to use them, that's for sure. However, Gayatri, as I mentioned to Chris Hedges, though Chris didn't fancy him much, it seems to me that he's made a big mistake making an enemy of Elon Musk. Elon Musk has the biggest platform in the world, and he is openly threatening Elon Musk with not just deportation back to Africa. Yes, I hope Africa. For Africa's sake that doesn't happen, but he is threatening other unnamed sanction and punishment against Musk. Musk responded by saying, it would be so easy and I'm so tempted to rise to this bait, but I won't for now. I actually think that Elon Musk has the goods, the receipts, and the means of destroying Trump's presidency. See if I'm right, see if I'm wrong. Right, let's get out for chips. Thanks very much indeed to everyone who watched or worked on the show tonight. A very fine number of new callers was a particular feature. Big thanks to my guests, Mnar and Chris, and God willing, we'll be back here on Sunday with the mothership, the mother of all talk shows. See you then.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.